The question answers of considerable speck from PW module. Poem are considerable speck. The name of the poem is A Considerable Speck by Robert Frost. Robert Frost, one of America's greatest poets, received more honors than any other contemporary literary figure in USA. In the USA, mane in the United States of America. So Robert Frost, 1874 to 1963, one of America's greatest poets who received more honors than any other contemporary literary figure in USA. In the USA. The first thing that strikes the reader about the poetry of Robert Frost is that it is deceptively simple in nature. Frost wrote on the simplest themes in the most easy to understand language. However, a careful reading of his poems reveals that they are subtle, intricate, complex, and richly textured with several layers of meaning. A Considerable Speck by Robert Frost is a wonderfully graphic description of intelligence in action. The subject of the poem is an almost invisible mite, one little insect, with the poet narrator, which the poet narrator discovers on a sheet of paper. The opening lines of the poem are an account of the mind's panic and its frantic efforts to run across a page of writing in a futile attempt to evade the narrator. It is only when the mite moves that the narrator realizes that the speck is a living mite. Once he realizes that it is intelligent, he follows its desperate actions with interest. The poet goes on to explain the reason why the narrator chooses to save the life of the mite. The poem can be a perfect illusion of what Albert Schweitzer Switzer called a reverence for life. Now, Considerable Speck, name of the poem and the poet. A Considerable Speck, poet is Robert Frost. Main character of the poem is the speaker, the observer who notices the speck. What it refers to in the stanza, it refers to the tiny living mite which the speaker notices. Where was it observed? It was observed on a white sheet of paper across which the speaker had written. Next, what was the speaker doing? The speaker was writing on a paper with a pen poised in the air, with the pen poised in the air, ready to end a sentence. Next, what did he observe? He observed a small moving speck which at first seemed to be like dust. What the poet found strange about it? The poet found it strange that the speck was alive, not just dust, and that it seemed to have its own inclinations. Next, what conclusion did he come to? He realized that even the tiniest creatures have life and purpose, and noticing them requires attentive observation. Next, explanation of the lines. A speck that would have been beneath my sight on any but a paper sheet so white, set off across what I had written there, and I had idly poised my pen in air to stop with a period of ink. Period of ink money with a full stop, with a dot of ink. A speck money a small spot that would have been beneath my sight, money that was in front of the sight of the poet on any but a paper sheet so white, money it was there on a white sheet of paper set off across what I had written there. So he was writing something on the white sheet of paper and he noticed that speck on that paper, and I had idly poised my pen in the air. Poised means balanced. To stop it with a period of ink means with a full stop or a dot of ink. When something strange about it made me think this was no dust speck by my breathing blown, but unmistakably a living mind with inclinations it could call its own. Mane, it had its own inclinations. It paused as with suspicion of my pen, and then came racing wildly on again to where my manuscript was not yet dry. So the mite had propensity of its own. Propensity means a habit of behaving in a particular way. With inclination, it could call its own. Mane the mite had propensity. Propensity means a habit of behaving in a particular way. The mite had propensity of its own. It paused as with suspicion of my pain. First it paused and then came racing wildly on again. Money it started running very fast to where my manuscript was not yet dry. Money the place where the ink was still wet. It didn't dry. Then paused again and either drank or smelt. So the mite drank or smelt the ink. With loathing for again it turned to fly. Loathing money intense disgust. Money it could the poet could understand that the smell or the taste of the ink did not please the mite. The mite expressed intense disgust towards the smell or the taste of the ink. Plainly with an intelligence I dealt. Now the poet observes first he understood the propensity of the mite, and then he noticed the intelligence of the mite. It seemed plainly with an intelligence I dealt. It seemed too tiny to have a room for feet. So it was very, very tiny. God, money. The poet was a little astonished that how could the such a tiny mite have feet also, yet must have had a set of them complete to express how much it did want to die. It ran with terror and with cunning crept, money creeping cunningly. It faltered, money hesitated. The word faltered means hesitated. I could see it hesitate. The mite hesitated, which means the mite had intelligence. In spite of the fact that the mite was too tiny to be observed, yet it had intelligence on its own. Intelligence of its own. Then the middle of the open sheet, cower down in desperation to accept. Cower down means to crouch down. Helplessness. So the mite was helpless in front of a big creature like the poet. Whatever I accorded it of fate. So, whatever the decision would be from the side of the poet, the negligible mite would have to accept it, isn't it? I have none of the tenderer than thou, collectivistic regimenting love, with which the modern world is being swept. So, the poet, hates collectivism. He hates equality too much, giving too much importance to equality. But this poor microscopic item now, since it was nothing I knew evil of, so these are the reasons why the poet doesn't do any harm to the mind, because he understood that the mite did not have any evil intention. He couldn't notice any evil intention in the mite, first reason, and secondly, the mite had intelligence. In spite of being a tiny creature, still it had intelligence. And that's the reason the poet decides not to do any harm to the mite. I let it lie there till I hope it slept. I have a mind myself and recognize mind when I meet with it in any guise. So, in whatever form the poet meets the other creatures, he notices the intelligence of that creature. It can be a negligible mite also, but his eyes doesn't evade to notice that. His eyes doesn't fail to notice the intelligence of even a tiny creature like the Might. I have a mind myself and recognize mind when I meet with it in any guise. No one know how glad I am to find on any sheet the least display of mind. So a speck that would have been beneath my sight, money, the speck is extremely small, almost invisible under normal circumstances. Next, on any but a paper sheet so white, the white background of the paper makes it visible. Next, set up across what I had written there. Money, the speck was moving over the words the speaker had written, making it noticeable. Next, what does the word, Ejo, uh, paused with suspicion of my pain and then came, then paused again and either drank or smelt with loathing, for again it turned to fly. Plainly with an intelligence I dealt, it seemed too tiny to have room for feet, yet must have had a set of them complete to express how much it didn't want to die. So where does the word inclinations mean? And how is it referred here? Inclination means the tendencies, desires, or natural tendencies of the living creature. Here it refers to the mind's own independent will and actions, showing it moves according to its own whims. Why did the speck pause? The mind paused because it was cautious. The mind paused because why did the speck pause? The mind paused because it was cautious, suspicious, exploring its surroundings carefully. It's an important question that why the mind paused. The mind paused because it was cautious, because it was suspicious, because it was exploring its surroundings carefully. It was not random movement, but intentional hesitation reflecting its awareness. So you'll have to memorize this answer. The mind paused because it was cautious, suspicious, and exploring the surroundings carefully. It was not random movement, but intentional hesitation reflecting its awareness. Next, what does the word inclinations mean and how is it referred here? Inclination means the tendencies, desires, or natural tendency of a living creature. जो propensity. Hmm. Here it refers to the mind's own independent will and actions, showing it moves according to its own whims. Next question. Where did the mind run towards and why? The writer's mind ran towards the possible effects of the mind on the manuscript, imagining what it might do or what it might sense. He's concerned about the tiny creature disturbing. No, এটা তো একদম where did the mind run towards and why? এটা বোধহয় the mind ran towards the ink. This answer is actually wrong. The answer will be the mind ran towards the manuscript, no, to where my manuscript was not yet dry. Money, the mind ran towards that place where the manuscript was not yet dry. Money, the place where the ink did not yet dry up, to where the manuscript of the poet was not yet dry, to where the manuscript of the poet was not yet dry. Next, what made the mind fly again? The this answer is also wrong. This will be the smell or taste of the ink made the mind run away from the place because it expressed Now, the smell or taste of the ink made the mind run away from the place because it expressed loathing towards the taste or smell of the ink. Next question. What wrong was the writer? The wrong is the poet's anthropomorphism. He attributes intentions, loathing, and purpose to a tiny mind. And this is important. Poet's anthropomorphism. The poet below believes in anthropomorphism. He attributes intentions, loathing, and purpose to a tiny mind. He is projecting human traits into it. This is also an answer which you'll have to memorize. The poet believes in anthropomorphism. He attributes intentions, loathing, and purpose to a tiny mind. He attributes human qualities in a tiny mind. He is projecting human traits onto it. Next, what did the writer realize he was dealing with? He realized that he was dealing with a living mind possessing its own intelligence and instincts. What made him feel so? The mind's purposeful actions, terror, and intelligence suggested awareness, not cunning. I won't call it cunning. It has used the word cunning. I will use the word intelligence. The mind's purposeful action, terror, and intelligence suggests awareness and survival instincts which impressed the poet. The mind's purposeful action, its intelligence and awareness suggested awareness and survival instincts which impressed the poet. Next question. What amused the writer to think about the feet of the tiny creature? He amused himself imagining the tiny feet having enough room to show its fear, a humorous exaggeration of how such a small creature expresses terror. Was he correct in his judgment? Not literally. The mind does not have human like intelligence. But the poet's observation creatively interprets its instinctive behavior as intelligence. Mane, was he correct in his judgment? Not literally. The mind does not have human, mane, have the attributes of a human being. Isn't it? Does not have the qualities of a human being in reality. It is the poet believes in anthropomorphism. It is the belief of anthropomorphism of the poet that makes him critically interpret by critically attribute human intentions or human traits to the mind. Not literally. The mind does not have human like intelligence. When it does not have intelligence like the human beings, does not have intelligence like the human beings. But the poet's observation and his belief in anthropomorphism forces him to give human traits but project human traits to a mind. Next, the mind ran with terror, with cunning crept. And this describes the mind's cleverness and alertness in escaping danger. Terror shows instinctive fear. Cunning shows calculated survival, qualities of a highly aware mind. Next, figure of speech use. The poet uses personification, attributing human like thoughts, intelligence, and emotions to the mind. Figure of speech in the line, the microscope. The line is symbolic, it is metaphorical. The microscope represents a tool of observation and scrutiny, symbolizing how carefully attention can reveal intelligence and complexity, even the tiniest creatures. Microscope কথাটা আছে? Yes, the poet calls this poor microscopic item. So, microscope, the word microscope is there. The poet calls it a microscopic item. Symbolical or metaphorical, the microscope represents a tool for observation and scrutiny, symbolizing how careful attention can reveal intelligence and complexity in even the tiniest creatures. The key reason for this figure of speech in the title answer is not there. I would say only I can say this thing, that a considerable speck, although the speck means something which is very negligible, but that negligible thing is also is has been called considerable. Next, action of the mind observed by the writer. The poet sees the speck. This will be the answer. Juxtaposition of speck and considerable. So this is an oxymoron, use of oxymoron. The literary device which has been used in the title of the poem by the poet is oxymoron. The juxtaposition creates paradox. Oxymoron means two opposite things that is written together. Speak and considerable. So this is an oxymoron. This juxtaposition creates paradox. Next, action of the might observed by the writer. The poet sees the speck hesitate and then cower in the middle of the sheet as if conscious of its vulnerability. You cover down, not only cover, if you write it will be wrong. The poet sees the might hesitate and then it cowers down in the middle of the sheet as if conscious of its vulnerability. So the mite was conscious of its vulnerability, and that's why it hesitates and cowers down in the middle of the sheet. The mite is conscious of its vulnerability, and that's the reason it cowers down in the middle of the sheet. Next, why did the mite hesitate? It hesitated due to fear and uncertainty, unsure of the new environment and the potential threat posed by the poet. So the mite hesitated due to fear and uncertainty, unsure of the new environment and the potential threat posed by the poet. The mite hesitated due to fear and uncertainty, unsure of the new environment and the potential threat posed by the poet. What did the mite do on reaching the middle of the page? It cowered in desperation, submitting passively to whatever might happen. Next, was this a correct decision by the mite? Did it have a choice? Why? It was instinctive and the correct survival response for a tiny creature facing a larger unknown force. So, this answer also you'll have to mark up. The poet sees the speck hesitant, might hesitate because and cowers down in the middle of the sheet as if conscious of its vulnerability. This one you'll have to memorize. This answer you'll have to memorize. That was the decision of the might correct? Yes, it was instinctive. It was instinctive, and the correct survival response for a tiny creature facing a larger unknown force. The mite did not have a real choice. Its instinct guided it to cover rather than act boldly. So, it did not have a real choice. Its instinct guided it to cower down, rather than act boldly. It was instinctive and correct survival response for a tiny creature facing a larger unknown force. It did not have a real choice. It did not have a real choice, ठीक ना, alternative choice. It did not have an alternative choice. Its instinct guided it to cower down rather than act boldly. Next, tenderer than thou, collectivistic regimenting love with which the modern world is being swept. Explanation of the lines. The poet contrasts its own impartial and detached attitude towards the speck with the modern tendency to impose overbearing moral or social rules, tenderer than thou, collectivistic regimenting love. মানে, the poet contrasts its own impartial and detached attitude towards the speck, contrasts his own impartial, detached attitude to the towards the speck with modern tendency to impose overbearing moral or social rules. না না, contrast কিছুই না. Truth of the modern world, truth of the modern world মানে Frost criticizes modern society for over controlling, moralizing tendencies that ignore individuality and spontaneity. Flaw in modern mindset. The flaw is rigid, collective minded thinking, which suppresses individual freedom and the recognition of mind in its many forms. বলছে যে Frost criticizes modern society for over controlling and moralizing tendencies that ignore individuality and spontaneity. The flaw is rigid, collective minded thinking which suppresses individual freedom and the recognition of mind in its many forms. Next, fate decided for the speck. The poet lets it lie undisturbed, giving it safety and peace. And why does he leave the mite undisturbed? Because the speck had done no harm. It was not evil. Next, what made the poet glad? He was pleased to recognize a display of mind even in a tiny, insignificant creature. Next, the poet's attitude towards the speck. Curious, respectful, appreciative, and compassionate attitude. Next, similarity between the poet and the speck. Both have a mind and awareness capable of perception and response. Both have a mind and awareness capable of perception and response. How he upholds his quality. By acknowledging and respecting the speck's instinctive mind, he shows reverence for consciousness wherever it exists. Ki? By acknowledging and respecting the speck's instinctive mind, he shows reverence for consciousness wherever it exists. Next, figures of speeches. কি use হয়েছে? Acha. Next question is, what action of the mite did the writer observe? The writer observed that the mite faltered, hesitated, and then cowered down in the middle of the sheet, appearing submissive. This answer also you'll have to memorize. The writer observed that the mite faltered, hesitated, cowered down in the middle of the sheet, appearing submissive. The writer observed that the mite faltered, hesitated, then cowered down in the middle of the sheet, appearing submissive. Next question. Why did the mite hesitate? The hesitation reflects its uncertainty and fear in new, potentially dangerous environment. The hesitation reflects, why did the mite hesitate? The hesitation was because of the uncertainty and fear in a new, potentially dangerous environment. And the potentially dangerous environment was the open manuscript. Next, what did the mite do on reaching the middle of the page? The mite cowered down in desperation, showing submission. The mite cowered down in desperation, showing submission and a readiness to accept whatever might happen. So it cowered down in desperation, showing submission, but the mite was submissive, subservient, and readiness to accept whatever might happen. Next, was this a correct decision by the mite? From an instinctive point of view, yes, it was a correct survival response. It did not have a conscious choice. Its actions were guided by instinct rather than reasoned decision making. It did not have any alternative choice. Its actions were guided by instinct rather than reasoned decision making. Next, explain the lines, I have none of the tenderer than thou collectivistic regimenting love with which the modern world is being swayed. The poet contrasts his fair, non judgmental attitude towards the might with the modern tendency to impose overbearing contrast into Koreni. The poet has fair, non judgmental attitude and with the modern tendency to impose overbearing standardized moral codes. So he hates the overbearing standardized and moral codes. The poet is fair and he is non judgmental in his attitude. Next, how does the poet put forth the truth of the modern world? He highlights that modern society often ignores individual freedom and enforces conformity and moral regulations. This is very important. The poet believes that modern society often ignores individual freedom by individuality আর কি করে enforces conformity and moral regulation. The modern society enforces more conformity and moral regulations. The modern society ignores and enforces conformity and moral regulations. Next question, what flaw does he find in the minds of the people in the modern world? The flaw is an over controlling moralistic collectivism that suppresses individuality and freedom of action. The flaw is an over controlling moralistic collectivism that suppresses individuality and freedom of action. Next, what fate does the writer decide for the poor microscopic item? He decides to leave it unharmed, allowing it to rest peacefully. He decides to leave it unharmed, allowing it to rest peacefully. What reason did he provide for his decision? The might had done no harm. Bracket লিখেছে nothing I knew evil of. So the poet felt no reason to hurt it. What made the writer glad? The poet was glad to observe the intelligence of even a tiny creature like the mite, a negligible creature like the mite. What would you describe the writer's attitude towards the speck on the manuscript sheet? The poet's attitude is respectful, curious, appreciative, and compassionate. The poet's attitude is respectful, curious, appreciative, and compassionate. So the poet has a mind. What similarity does the writer find between the himself and the little mite? The poet has a mind, and so does the mite. The poet concludes by affirming that he recognizes and appreciates the presence of mind wherever he encounters it, irrespective of however humble the guys be. Irrespective of however humble the guys be, the poet appreciates the presence of mind wherever he encounters it. Or the spake is It is a minuscule speck. minuscule, minuscule speck. The mite is apprehensive of the intentions of the poet. The mite is apprehensive of the intentions of the poet. The mite was following its own inclinations. He discerns that the speck is definitely a living mite transversing the page. মানে the poet discerns that DISCERNS এগুলো কোনো এক্সপ্লানেশন এখন বলছি না, কয়েকটা ভালো কথা বলছি, যেমন মাইনিউস্কিউল স্পেক MINUSCULE মাইনাসকিউল স্পেক। আর মাইটটা কি করছিল? দ্য মাইট ওয়াজ ফলোইং ইটস ওন ইনক্লিনেশনস। The mite was apprehensive of the intentions of the poet, and the poet has a mind, and so does the mite. The poet has a mind, and so does the mite. The poet concludes by affirming that he recognizes and appreciates the presence of mind wherever he encounters it, irrespective of however humble the guise be. The energetic mind scampers over to the part of the manuscript where the ink was still damp. The energetic mind scampers over to the part of the manuscript where the ink was still damp. The energetic mind scampers over to the part of the manuscript where the ink was still damp. Energetic mindটা কি করছিল? Scamper করছিল over to the part of the manuscript. Scamper is the name of the dog. So the energetic mind scampers over to the part of the manuscript where the ink was still damp. The ink was still damp. The mite despises the flavor and odor of the ink. গন্ধ আর স্বাদ আর গন্ধ, flavor, taste, flavor and odor. The mite despises the taste, flavor and odor of the ink, as if it considered the ink to be a noxious substance. Noxious. As if it considered the ink to be a noxious substance. Next, glove and the lion. The glove and the lions. Leigh Hunt. Leigh Hunt, 1784 to 1859, romantic writer, essayist, editor, critic, and prolific poet, was a contemporary of romantic poets Keats, Byron, and Shelley. He was also one of the most outspoken and effective journalists in the age of French Revolution. Hunt is remembered for his vivid descriptions, the lyrical quality of his verse, delight in nature, and for his mastery of mood and atmosphere. Set against a medieval backdrop where valor and gallantry are prized, Hunt's poem The Glove and the Lance is a humorous narrative that explores the dangers of allowing pride and vanity rather than love to dictate one's actions, especially in a romantic relationship. Hunt seems to be making a statement against the stereotyping of men as macho figure creatures who are engaged in perpetual contest to prove themselves to their lady loves. The poem is to be read and enjoyed for its lyricism and gentle humor without trying to discover a central message or moral. The Glove and the Lance, Leigh Hunt. King Francis was a hearty king and he loved a royal sport. King Francis proper name মানে এটা একটা নাম পুরো, identifies the ruler. Was মানে linking verb, sets up description. A haughty king, haughty মানে proud, disdainful, scornful of others, an epithet that immediately criticizes him. এই যে হটি কথাটা ব্যবহার করা হলো এটা কিন্তু একটা এপিথেট that immediately criticizes his pride and arrogance. And connective links character trait to leave this. Loved মানে felt strong liking or delight in. Royal sport মানে রয়্যাল মানে বিলঙ্গিং টু অর অ্যাপ্রোপ্রিয়েট ফর আ কিং। স্পোর্ট মানে পাস টাইম গেম স্পেকটাকল ইন ওল্ডার প্যাসেজ অফেন আ ভায়োলেন্ট অর পাবলিক স্পেকটাকল। নেক্সট, King Francis is introduced as proud as someone who takes pleasure in an aristocratic spectacle, a pastime associated with kingship. The line uh, means the line describes the character and appreciate preparing for a display. যাই হোক, and one day as his hands fought sat looking on the hunt মানে one day মানে temporal marker on a particular occasion, conversational story like opening. এই যে and one day as his lions fought মানে lions fought এটা sat looking on the court. His lions fought মানে the beasts fought in the arena. The beasts fought in the arena. If animals in the spectacle sat looking on মানে he took a seat looking on মানে watching. A passive spectator looking on মানে so King Francis was a passive spectator. King Francis was a passive spectator. The royal audience or arena of the king's court, where people gathered to watch events, also connotes power and ceremony. On one occasion, while the spectacle, mane probably the beasts fighting, took place, spectacle ta ki, the beasts fighting, took place, King Francis sat watching from the court. The nobles find the benches and the ladies. Acha, I hope question. The nobles filled the benches and the ladies in their pride, and amongst them sat the Count de Lodge with one for whom he sighed. And truly it was a gallant thing to see that crowning show, valor and love, and a king above and the royal beasts below. Ramped and roared the lions with horrid laughing jaws. They beat, they glared, gave blows like beams a wind went with their paws. Mane, the nobles, high ranked men of the court. Nobles mane, high ranked men of the court. Filled the benches, mane, the seats were occupied by the nobles, vivid image of a packed audience. The noble women were also present. Pride, something there, pride money. Ladies in their pride. Pride here means dignified. Social poise. Importantly, it can also turn on a pride, a group of lions. Acha, pride হচ্ছে a pride of lions মানে a group of lions. Abar here ladies in their pride মানে ladies মানে proud ladies, that double sense, social pride versus pride of the beasts is probably intentional. And amongst them মানে amid the crowd sat the Count de Lodge. মানে amid the crowd sat Count de লর্ড, তাহলে কিং ফ্রান্সিস যে স্পোর্ট দেখতে, the hearty king who loved sports, warm, friendly, he was sitting in the arena, open arena, to watch the royal sport. And there sat the Count de Lodge, a nobleman named Count de Lodge is seated there. Count is the title and de Lodge is the name. With one for whom he sighed, mane a lady for he felt longing or romantic. Side implies tender, perhaps unrequited or restrained love. The benches were full of nobles and ladies, among them Count D. Lodge, Count, Count, C is capital, D, D is in small letter, and Lodge, Lorge, L is also capital. So C is capital, L is capital, Count, gap, small d, small e, gap, capital L, Lodge. The Lord sat, Count the Lord sat beside with one for whom he sighed. And truly, it was a gallant thing to see that crowning show, valor and love, and a king above and the royal beasts below. Mane, the narrator confirms the spectacle's impressiveness. Gallant money, a splendid show it was. Chivalrous show. The show which is splendid and chivalrous. Chivalrous. To behold virtual emphasis, that crowning show, the finest, culminating or most prestigious show, mane display or spectacle, the event is the highlight. Placing them together sets up a contrast and coupling of battlefield or masculine bravery with courtly romance. So there is muscular juxtaposition of masculinity, bravery, chivalry with courtly romance. The narrator calls the spectacle a splendid crowning display mixing bravery and romance. It is the show is both martial and sentimental. So the narrator calls the spectacle a splendid crowning display mixed with bravery, chivalry, and romance. So the show is both martial and sentimental. Next, spatial image. The king sits above the arena. Above also suggests predominance, authority. Animals kept by the court. Royal beasts. Royal repeats the association with kingship. Below, money in the arena. Lower in status and position. Ramped money likely from ramp or rampant, to rear up, rage or move violently implies violent motion. Could also be poetic form of ramped. The animals kept by in the repeats the association with kingship. Below in the arena, lower in status and position. Acha. Gallant thing to see that crowning show, valor and love, and a king above and the royal beasts below. So this signifies that animals kept by the মানে the king is above and the royal beasts which are lower in status they are below in the arena. And road মানে ambiguous. Ramped and roared the lions. Ramped মানে threatening, menacing manner. হ্যাঁ, roared the lions মানে the beasts roared. The lions exclusively names the beasts. Horrid laughing মানে horrifying মানে dreadful, laughing মানে the sound of laughter. The phrase personifies the animals, giving মানে telling that it seemed as if they were laughing, makes that laughter terrifying and combination of mirth and horror. The king sits above while the royal lions are below, violently moving. They are noisy and grotesque. The beast sounds are described as dreadful, mocking laughter. The spatial contrast underlines social and possibly moral distance. The horrid laughing introduces a note of menace beneath the spectacle. Haughty মানে proud, disdainful, negative pride. Royal মানে associated with monarchy, grand, ceremonial, sport মানে pastime. In historical usage, often a violent public spectacle. Court মানে the king's the audience, also a public ceremonial space. Nobles মানে social hierarchy and the social hierarchy and the spectators. Pride মানে self respect of the ladies. Our group of lions কেউ pride বলে, so it has double meaning. Pun. Count মানে title. Count is the title of the nobleman. Side মানে expression of longing, melancholy desire. Gallant মানে chivalrous, showing bravery and also romantic. Crowning মানে বোঝা যায়নি। ভ্যালার মানে ব্রেভারি ইন দ্য ব্যাটল। রয়্যাল বিস্টস মানে দি ডেঞ্জারাস অ্যানিমালস ইউজড ফর এন্টারটেনমেন্ট। র্যাম্পড মানে রেয়ার্ড, র্যাম্পেজড, REARED, রেয়ার্ড, র্যাম্পেজড। রোর্ড মানে the beasts were roaring. Horrid মানে dreadful, horrifying. Laughing মানে sound of amusement, here used to create uncanny mocking effect. ইমেজারি কিভাবে ইউজ হয়েছে? দ্য প্যাসেজ paints a vivid scene, packed benches, ladies in pride, king above, beasts below, and the beasts horrible sounds. Epithets কেন? A haughty king assigns character quickly and economically. haughty king বলে দিচ্ছে, এটাকে এপিথেট বলছে, জানি না কেন। অ্যান্টিথেসিস কেন? না কিং, এপিথেট মানে ডাইরেক্ট ক্যারেক্টারাইজেশন, আ হটি কিং, এটা এপিথেট দেখতে হবে। অ্যান্টিথেসিস কেন? আ কিং অ্যাবাভ অ্যান্ড দ্য রয়্যাল বিস্টস বিলো মানে কন্ট্রাস্ট। এই দেখা গেল প্যারাডক্স বা অক্সিমোরন, কন্ট্রাস্ট, আবার এবার অ্যান্টিথেসিসও বলছে কন্ট্রাস্ট। Civilization or authority versus raw nature, also valor and love contrast, martial bravery with tender feeling. Double pan মানে pride can mean dignity and a group of lions. The word connects the social scene to the animal spectacle. Personification মানে the beasts are given human qualities. Horrid laughing attributes laughter to animals, which makes their sound seem mocking and uncanny. Alliteration or sound echo মানে repetition of initial consonant sounds creates cohesion and musical quality. Ramped and roared মানে or valor and love মানে also repeated king emphasizes juxtaposition মানে of irony. The pomp of courtly love sits beside brutal spectacle. কি juxtaposition of two opposite things, the pomp of courtly love and brutal spectacle. The same event celebrates chivalry yet involves violence. This may create ironic distance. What looks noble can be cruel. Enjambment, enjambment মানে The long flowing sentence. Enjambment কোনটা? Long flowing sentence. The long make or replicates the continuous sweep of spectacle. The narrator doesn't pause. He moves from crowd to count to them in one breath. They beat, they glared, gave blows like beams, a wind went with their paws. With gallowing might and stifled roar, they rolled on one another, till all the pit with sand and men, many men, সিংহের যেটা মেন থাকে, was in a thunderous smother. The bloody foam above the bars came whisking through the air. Through the air. Said Francis then, faith, gentlemen, we are better here than there. The arena symbolizes the social order. King, nobles, and perhaps the brutal basis of power. The king's pleasure in the sport may symbolize arrogance and callousness. এগুলো দরকার নেই. Next, ramped and roared the lions with horrid laughing jaws. Mane the lions charged about and bellowed. Their mouths looked terrible and almost like a cruel laugh. Ramped mane rushed about wildly. Roared mane the roars, loud sound the lions made. এটা অডিটরি ইমেজ একটা. হরিড মানে টেরিফুল, ড্রেড, টেরিফাইং, ড্রেডফুল. লাফিং জজ হচ্ছে পার্সনিফিকেশন. দ্য লায়ন্স মাউথস আর ডিসক্রাইবড অ্যাজ ইফ দে ওয়ার লাফিং. আ ঘ্যাস্টলি মকিং ইমেজ, এটা একটা বিভৎস. দে বিট, দে গ্লেয়ার্ড, গেভ ব্লোজ লাইক বিমস অ্যান্ড আ and kind went with their paws. They beat and stared fiercely. Their strikes were so powerful that they have been compared to beams. ওদের এক একটা স্ট্রাইক এত পাওয়ারফুল ছিল that they have been compared with beams, beams, gave blows like beams. Simile. And each swipe saw of paw sent a gust of air. They beat, they glared, repeated subject emphasis, rapid, repeated violent actions. Gave blows like beams, মানে simile, blows compared to beams. Heavy, straight, solid strikes. Beam যেমন heavy হয়, solid হয়. Similarly, the blows of the lions, the ferocious lions, have been compared to the beams. So, use of simile. A wind went with their paws, movement so strong it tired the air. With galloping might and stifled roar, they rolled on one another. Using their bulk and strength with muffled roars, they thrashed and tumbled over each other. Galloping might money immense heavy strength. Galloping suggests flopping, rolling with force. Stifled roar money roar that is somewhat swallowed or muffled. The violence is intense. Rolled on one another money they tumbled and wrestled together. Till all the pit with sand and men was in a dangerous na thunderous smother মানে until the whole arena was filled, the lions manes tangled, and there was a deafening suffocating confusion. Pit mane pit mane the arena where the animals were fighting. Sand and mane mane the flying sand and the tangled hair of the lion, tangled mane of the lions. Thunderous smother mane loud overwhelming confusion. The bloody foam above the bars came whisking through the air. The froth and blood from the lions' mouths slashed up over the barriers and reeled through the air. Ki bloody foam mane violent graphic image. Saliva mixed with blood from the fight. Above the bars mane over the enclosure's barriers. Whisking mane quick like movement through the air. Said Francis, then, faith, gentlemen, we are here and there. King Francis comments with a retone, WRI retone. that they are lucky to be sitting safely watching. They would be worse if they were the lions. Faith মানে interjection, truly indeed we are better here than there মানে ironic remark, the court is safer than being in the pit. So the arena was safer than being on the court was safer than being on the pit, pit. Also undercuts, আচ্ছা যাই হোক, হার্টি মানে রোবাস্ট, জোভিয়াল, ফন্ড অফ প্লেজার্স, রয়্যাল স্পোর্ট মানে পাস টাইম অফ রয়্যালটি, ক্রাউনিং শো মানে দ্য চিফ মোস্ট স্প্লেন্ডিড ডিসপ্লে, ক্রাউনিং মানে কালমিনেটিং, ভ্যালার মানে ব্রেভারি, ইমেজারি, ভিজুয়াল, অডিটরি, ট্যাকটাইল, তিন ধরনের ইমেজারি ইউজ হচ্ছে, স্ট্রং সেন্সরি ডিটেলস থ্রু আউট, ব্লাডি ফোম, হুইস্কিং থ্রু দি এয়ার, রোড মানে হুইস্কিং থ্রু দি এয়ার, এটা কি সাইট, স্ট্রং সেন্সারি ডিটেলস মানে ব্লাডি ফোম, রোড মানে সাউন্ড, স্যান্ড অ্যান্ড মেন মানে imagery of visual and touch. These pull the reader into the violent scene. Personification of laughing jaws makes the lions seem mockingly human, increasing unease মানে uneasiness. Simile gave blows like beams মানে compare strikes of the lions to solid heavy beams. অ্যানাফোরা কোথায়, রিপিটেশন, অ্যানাফোরা বা রিপিটেশন, দে বিট, দে গ্লেয়ার্ড, রিপিটেশন অফ দে কুইকেন্স দ্য রিদিম, অ্যালিটারেশন কি, পিট উইথ স্যান্ড অ্যান্ড মেন মানে থান্ডারাস স্মোদার, রিপিটেশন অফ এস অর টি সাউন্ডস, র্যাম্পড অ্যান্ড রোড, আর সাউন্ড ক্রিয়েটস মিউজিক্যালিটি অ্যান্ড এমফেসিস, onomatopoeia, record sound like road, whisking, thunderous, mimic or suggest the sound present in the scene. Juxtaposition, the civilized court, valor and love, the court and ladies is placed beside brutal animal violence, highlighting the gap between spectacle and suffering. Ironic and cring, Francis's line is ironic. He enjoys the spectacle and remarks, he is glad he is not in it. A comment on safety and perhaps callousness. Hyperbole কেন? Phrases like thunderous, smoother, and overall tumult, emphasizing the extremity of fight. Enjambment কেন? Lines run into one another without a full stop, keeping the action swift and continuous. A description of Dillard's beloved as beauteous, lively dame with smiling lips and sharp, bright eyes, which always seemed the same. A beauteous, lively dame with smiling lips and sharp, bright eyes, which always seemed the same. This means she appeared beautiful, lively, outwardly pleasant, but her expressions were fixed, suggesting a calculating or cold personality beneath the charm. Next, what did she overhear? While she was in the royal court, she overheard some conversation suggesting that Count Dillard's devotion could be tested, that if she wanted to know how much he loved her, she would demand something dangerous from him. Next, said Francis, then, faith, gentlemen, we are better here than there. Delodge's love overheard the king, a beauteous, lively dame with smiling lips and sharp, bright eyes, which always seemed the same. তাহলে description of Delodge's love, and she overheard the king saying, faith, gentlemen, we are better here than there. Delodge's love overheard the king. শুনে নিল যে কিং ফ্রান্সিস কি বলছে। এবার ডিলর্জেস লাভের ডেসক্রিপশন, আ বিউটিফুল লাইভলি ডেম with smiling lips and sharp bright eyes which always seemed the same. She thought, the Count, my lover, is brave as brave can be. He surely would do wondrous things to show his love of me. So she believed that as soon as she overheard King Francis saying, "Faith, gentlemen, we are better here than there," she immediately, immediately a thought came to her mind. And what thought came to her mind? She thought of testing her brave lover. He would surely do wondrous things to show his love of me. So it was her firm belief that the Count would do some, perform something very dangerous just to prove his love towards his, মানে, just to prove his chivalry. King, ladies, lovers all look on. The occasion is divine. I'll drop my glove to prove his love. Great glory will be mine. So, the reckless act of dropping glove to glorify herself. She is so self-obsessed. She was looking for an opportunity to demonstrate her own importance. She dropped her glove to prove his love, then looked at him and smiled. He bowed and in a moment leaped among the lions wild. The leap was quick. Eta question hote pare, how was the leap? The leap was quick. Return was quick. He has regained his place. So the lady was beauteous, lively, dame with smiling lips, sharp bright eyes, which always seemed the same. And how was the leap of the Count de Lodge? He bowed and in a moment leaped among the lions wild. The leap was quick, return was quick. He has regained his place. Then threw the glove, not with love, right in the lady's face. He then threw the glove, but not with love, right in the lady's face. By God, said Francis, rightly done, and he rose from where he sat. No love, quoth he, but vanity sets love a task like that. So, this is a medieval practice where gestures of bravery or chivalry were considered very noble. She wants to satisfy her inflated ego. So, what did she overhear? While she was in the royal court, she overheard some conversation suggesting that De Lodge's devotion could be tasted. As if she wanted to know how much he loved her, she would demand something dangerous for him. What reaction did she give to this moment? She smiled at the idea, but not in a warm or affectionate way. Smile was one of mischief or challenge, indicating malicious smile, indicating she was tempted to prove her lover in a perilous situation to prove his love. What opinion did she have about her lover? She believed that Count de Lodge would do. Count de Lodge would do anything to please her, even if it was reckless or life threatening. So it was her firm belief that Count de Lodge would do anything to please her, even if it was a reckless or life threatening act. In her mind, his love for her was so strong that he would not hesitate to obey her slightest wish. What, according to her, would her lover ready to do? She thought he would be willing to risk his life, even entering our den of lions, if it meant pleasing her or proving his devotion. Next, the occasion is divine. Mane, the lady meant the opportunity is perfect. The king was hoisting a grand show where the lions were in the arena, the perfect public stage for her, a perfect public spectacular show where she could test D-Lodge in front of everyone. So the venue seemed to be perfect to test the chivalry of D-Lodge in front of everyone. The dangerous acts she planned, she decided to drop her glove into the lion's pit during the fight. Her plan was to make Count D-Lodge retrieve it, a deadly task as proof of his love. Why she wished to do so? It wasn't a genuine affection. It was vanity and pride. She wanted to publicly display her power over him and how far he could go for her. The leap was quick, return was quick. So Count Deloge immediately jumped into the arena, grabbed the glove, and returned safely to his place. How did he throw the glove at her face? Not with love. He realized that she had selfishly risked his life for her amusement. So he threw the glove on her face with an act of anger and rejection, not romance. Why did the lady look at the count? He looked at him expecting praise, gratitude, and admiration for risking his life to please her. Why did the lady look at the count? She looked at him expecting praise, gratitude, and admiration for risking his life to please her. What did her smile indicate? The smile showed vanity and self satisfaction. She believed she had successfully proved his devotion and publicly humiliated him into showing it. At a reaction of the lover, instead of receiving her with gratitude, Count D. Lodge openly insulted her by throwing the glove at her face before the entire court. Did he live up to her expectation? No. She expected him to return the glove lovingly and perhaps dedicate his bravery to her. Instead, he exposed her selfishness. Instead, he exposed her selflessness and refused to play along with her vanity. Next, the unexpected incident. Ki holo? Everyone expected the count to honor the lady after receiving the glove. But instead, he rejected her cruel test, throwing the glove in her face and walking away. This shocked the court, but King Francis praised his action. King Francis's approval, agree or disagree? King Francis approved because the count valued his self-respect over blind obedience to a manipulative demand. King Francis approved because the count valued his self-respect over blind obedience to a manipulative demand. His reaction showed dignity, courage, and wisdom in recognizing the difference between true love and foolish risk. Character sketch of Count Deloge: brave, because he jumped into the lion's den without hesitation. Self respect, why? Refused to reward manipulative behavior. Quick witted, Cano acted fast but realized the insult behind the test. আর কি ছিল? ইন্ডিপেন্ডেন্ট মাইন্ডেড, মানে ডিডন্ট লেট সোশ্যাল প্রেশার অর ভ্যানিটি কন্ট্রোল হিম। তাহলে কাউন্ট ডিলর্জ ওয়াজ ব্রেভ, self-respecting, quick-witted, he had independent mind. He jumped into the lion's den without hesitation. He refused to reward manipulative behavior, acted fast, but realized the insult behind the test. He didn't let pressure to control him. Social pressure or vanity to control him. Our character sketch of the lady. Beautiful but vain, more interested in public attention than genuine affection, manipulative, created a dangerous challenge. Mane threw a dangerous challenge to test her lover's loyalty. She had too much pride, expected to be admired for her taste, and lacked empathy. Mane did not care about the danger to his life. Next question. Where does the action of the play take place? Who are all present? The action takes place in the royal courts arena where a lion's fight is being staged. Present, who are present there? King Francis himself, nobles, and ladies, and the lions in the arena. So, first is King Francis himself, second is nobles filling the benches, and then the ladies in their elegant dresses and with pride they were present. And who else were present? The lions in the arena. What type of king was King Francis? King Francis was a hearty, bold, ejo, hearty king and loved royal sport. Man, a hearty, bold, pleasure-loving king of royal sports and spectacles. He enjoyed display of courage and strength. For whom did the king sigh? Sighed for the lady. A woman and with beauty and pride impressed him. What kind of ladies has the poet put under them? The poet focuses on vain, attention seeking ladies of the court who are very cautious of their presence and social image. Either the nobles filled the benches, the ladies in their pride. What quality of ladies has the poet put? Vanity, arrogance, self-display, along with their tendency to test men's bravery for their own amusement. What does this show about the society of that time? This shows that society those times valued pageantry. PAGEANTRY, পেজেন্ট আমাদের সময় একটা বই ছিল পেজেন্ট অফ পোয়েমস। পেজেন্ট্রি মানে এক গাদা, মানে ভ্যালিউড পেজেন্ট্রি, পম্প, পাবলিক ডিসপ্লে, valued pageantry, pomp, and public display, was hierarchical and status conscious. তখনের society valued pageantry, pomp, public display, was hierarchical and status conscious, sometimes treated dangerous acts or brutal sports as entertainment. Hierarchical and social uh, and status conscious মানে HIERARCHIAL, hierarchical and status conscious, valued pageantry, pomp and public display, sometimes treated dangerous acts or brutal sports as entertainment. Lions fight as a metaphor. Underline this comparison in your own words. Metaphor: the lion's ferocious combat mirrors the competitive and predatory nature of court life, where nobles fight for favor and ladies' admiration. Similarity: both the lions and the courtiers are driven by pride, dominance, and desire to impress. Next, adjectives used to describe the event. Hearty, mane royal, horrid, mane laughing, proud, mane ladies, filled benches. Describe মানে hearty, royal, horrid, laughing, proud, এগুলো সবই adjective. Describe the visual imagery used to present lions and arena. Ramped and roared the lions with horrid laughing jaws, shows their wild, almost মানে ferocious nature of the lions. They beat, they glared, mane portrays meanness and confrontation. Gave blows like beams, mane their strikes are powerful and heavy like wooden beams. A wind went with their paws, mane conveys speed and force. Horrid laughing jaws gave blows like beams, a wind went with their paws. These evoke the lethal, fast-paced, and tense nature of the fight. How far do you appreciate animal fight as a sport for human entertainment? Personally, I do not appreciate animal fight as sport. Uh, Cruel, inflicting pain on animals for amusement and reflects a lack of compassion in modern ethics. Such entertainment is unacceptable because it exploits living beings for spectacle. What comment does King Francis make? Comments on courage and love, often challenging fights to prove devotion by daring acts. In this poem context of the poem, by retrieving a glove thrown into the arena. What would have been the reaction of the nobles to this comment? The nobles should have reacted with a mixture of admiration and nervousness. Lion, symbol of power, danger, and pride. Arena, the ruthless nature of court life. The competitive and ruthless nature of court life. Throne glove mane a taste of love, loyalty, and courage. Ladies' pride mane vanity and manipulation in their relationships.